Okay, so this is the dice roll app. So the first thing that you can do when you have a sample code is that you can run it and you can view the function of the app. So you can see the code compiling. There are any errors you can see down in here. So you will, if there are errors, you will see it under the problems tab. There should be some messages in here if there's a code error. Then you have running devices tab on the right side. You can turn that on and you can select that. Then actually currently this is by default it is appearing because I have compiled it before. However, now I think the code is compiled, it's finished. At the bottom, it's finished. So in order to see this, I can turn the phone on and I can see the function. So this app is enabling us to click on the button. Once you click on the button, the number inside this text view should change to a certain random value between 1 to 6. So the first steps of creating an app will be basically designing the user interface. So in here, basically, defining the text view and then defining the button, right? So when you're creating an app, you can do the UI design. So in here, we are basically using text view for this specific dice roll app I'm talking about. So you need basically the button view and the text view. So you need to select those views and you need to put those views into the user interface. Then you need to do the logical algorithm building. So you need to develop the algorithm. For that, you will use a Kotlin file. And Kotlin file can be adjusted. So for this UI design, you will be using the XML file. So for the Kotlin file, you will be having an extension of .kt, right? .kt extension. In the Kotlin file, you will be basically declaring the variables, right? So anyway, first you will have a certain, class inside which you define these variables, right? So by default, you will have a class called main activity. So I think I will close this and we can see in here, there's a class called main activity, right? And then this function that is inside, I mean, whatever the operations that are defined inside will be called when you start the main activity or the main screen. The activity word is used to define a screen in app development. So main activity refers to one screen. So inside main activity, we will define all the functions that we need to do inside the screen of our app. So inside one screen. So whatever the functions, variables that will be operated will be defined inside this main activity class. So the first thing that we will do is we will declare the variables. We will declare the variables. Then we will declare the functions. We will declare the functions. So when we start compiling this code, the code will activate this onCreate function, right? So the class main activity refers to the screen and its functions. Once you compile this code, it will access the screen, and once it accesses the screen, it will reach this callback function, which will be onCreate function, and this onCreate function will be the function that will be executed once you run this code and once you start the screen. So then once you access this onCreate function, all the variables and the methods that are defined inside this function will be run. So first you will be defining the variables. Variable in here are basically the button variable that we define, and we define the button variable as a val type of variable, and this variable is named as role button, and its type is button. So in Kotlin we have variable types named button. So in order for us to define it as button, in order not to get an error in here, when we defining the variable, we need to import the library which is related to the button variable. Then there's no error coming in here. Otherwise, you will get an error. If I remove this, you will get an error saying that it does not know anything about button. So it will have an error here. In order to avoid that, you have to import the necessary libraries. When you define this variable, you need to link it with the respective text view, and that text view you can obtain by defining the resource file, right? Resource file here is given by capital R, and the resource file has certain IDs for each text views, right? So text views and button views. So in here we are defining the button of the button that we define as role button, and that should be connected with the button that we define in the user interface. So the ID of the button that we define in the user interface is button. Then by it's named as button. So its ID is button. So we access that the button view using this command r.id.button. Then in the next line, we do the action of clicking the button using this command called set on click listener. So you can add that command on top of the variable role button. You can click the button using set on click listener. Once you click the button, what should happen? It comes inside these brackets, and that is roll dice. So roll dice is another function that we define inside this main activity class. So in the main activity class, we have another function that we define apart from the function that will be called once the app is running. So on create function will be called. So inside the on create function, we define another function, and that function is defined separately in this place. And it is defined as a private function. So the private function means that this function will not be accessible by other classes. only inside this activity class, main activity class, this function is available. So which means that anybody who wants to who want to uh, I mean who's using this app, anybody who's using this app will not be able to access these variables. So what I mean is that if there is some kind of a user like who's using this app, they will not be able to see these variables that define that define this application, right? So if you are using this app, you will only be able to see the outputs and the user interface. You cannot change the variables that define the functions of this button and the output that is shown in this text view. So you cannot control the parameters, right? You are just the user. You can only see what's happening as the from the outside. Inside functioning, you cannot see, and you cannot control them. So that controlling is limited only to the code and code inside this class main activity. So only if you do some changes inside this private function and other, when you're declaring the variables, only if you do some changes in this code, you can change the output behavior of the app. So private functions are therefore exclusively available only within the class. So inside the private function, we can define the what is the operation that should happen inside the roll dice. So inside this function, we can, if there are some kind of a inputs that we need to provide, we can provide in here. However, we can also leave it empty, and we can define some input parameters inside this function. So one of the things is that first we have to create something called object called dice. So this object called dice is created such that we can do some we can do some function on top of we can add a method on top of the object. So if you are familiar with object oriented programming, you will be able to I think understand about objects and classes, right? So in here, like in this line, the dice is a class that we define, right? Dice is a class that we define, and that class is defined in here. So the val dice is a variable that we define, and it is an object of this dice class, right? So the val type of variable is defined in here to indicate that the value that we obtain for the variable dice will remain constant once it is defined for a certain instance. So that means that if the output of this function, the output of this, the class that we define here, is one instance of that class will be dice. One instance of this object, one instance of this class will be an object named dice. After that, you can apply the function that we define inside this class. So the function role can be applied on this object dice. This function role is defined in here. Whatever the function that, whatever the operation that should be done once you call the role function is given inside these brackets. So this, this function is defined inside the class dice, capital dice. So once you apply this function on the object dice, then you will be able to get some output, and that output will be also stored as a val function, val variable, and val variables are like constant values for a certain time instance, a certain instance. So the variable dice roll will give a certain value as the output. It will be a certain value as the output. So that value is defined using this function roll. So the function roll gives an output of integer, and that integer will be a value that is between 1 and number of sides. So in Kotlin, you can define a range of numbers between two numbers using this using this two dots. So 1, 2 dot, and number of sides can give you the number of numbers between these two limits. So if you define the number of sides inside this dice class, right? The dice class gets input parameters that are sides, number of sides, and that variable type is defined as a private val. So which means that it is only defined for inside this class as well. It is only defined for this class, and this number of sides variable is a private variable. The output, sorry, the value of this number of sides should be defined as integer. So the return, so the function that we define will be based on this number of sides variable that we take as input. So this function is defined inside this class, and that function will take will be run, and it will not take any input parameters. That is why there's empty in here. The output of that function will be an integer. That integer will be defined by this section. So the integer that we obtain will be a value that is between 1 to 6. So 1 to some number that we define, and we can select a random number out of that range, right? So that is how the function is defined, and the function will be run once we call this function roll dice. So the roll dice function is called in here, and that roll dice function is called when the button is clicked, right? So if you want to do some changes on this app, right? So let's say you want to obtain a dice rolling app which gives us random values, any random value between 1 to 100. So in that case, what should change? What should be changed? And where should it be changed? In what line? Did you get my question? Right? Do you understand what I'm saying? Right? So if you want to change, if you want to get an output of a random, if you want to get a random number between 1 to 100, what is the code what is the change that you need to do in this code? Can you see the code? So in here I have mentioned as 6 in here, right? So if I change it into 100, right? The value that I give in here will be 100, and the class that we have defined in here as, you know, this class where you have to give a certain integer number as the input will be 100. So it will be 100, whatever the number of sites. In here, it will be 100. Therefore, the output will be a random number between 1 and 100. Let's see if it reflects on the app, and we can see that by doing so, we can adjust the output according to our needs, and we can access these, variables. If we have the code. So if we have the code, we can access this. The private functions and those functions uh, uh, are like having these variables, and these variables are only available inside those functions. So I don't know whether this code has been run. So yeah, so we can see that we have different outputs now, not only 1 to 6, but we have numbers between 1 to 100. Any random number we can obtain. So that is basically regarding this code. I think we discussed about this in the interactive class. So you can access this code. I have given this, the link to this in the LMS. You need to go to the GitHub link that I have given, and you have to go to that GitHub link that it goes to. And then you can download that. You can save it in the location where you have saved all the other Android projects. Right. So that is basically regarding the um, dice roller app, which is a very simple thing. In the last class, I think we then started talking about the Kotlin basics. So we will discuss a little bit more on that Kotlin basics today as well. So with this code, we discussed about the Kotlin basics. So so there are different types of data type that we can define. Firstly, we discussed about print function. Print ln is used to print any kind of a string that we define inside the print ln function. And then you can define lists of arrays, or list of elements using list of function. And this list you can define as either integer list, string list, and you can define the value of the list type using this list int data type. So this is a way of defining a list. List of function can be used to define a list. If you want to access the last element, you can use the command last. And then if you want to, when you compare with the other languages, this obtaining this last element is a little bit tricky, where you have to access the last element by defining the element, element index. And you need to define exactly the element index of the last element to obtain that. So rather than that, Kotlin has some, short versions of the commands. You can use that specific version of the command to get quick results from the code. Apart from that, we discussed about the val functions, val variables. There are two variable types, val type and var type of variables. Val type means unchangeable variable types. And those variable types, once you assign a certain value to a certain variable which is of val type, then you cannot reassign another value to that same variable. right? What I mean is that if you define the if you define let's say a certain variable as a val type, you need to uh, you need to make sure that you don't redefine another value to that same variable. So if I take val first and then try to define another new string, then there would be a certain error coming here, which says that conflicting declarations. Val first is string and val first string. So an error is coming saying that this first declaration has been done to a certain variable called first. Then another variable has been defined. So this is confusing to the software. So if I define it as maybe var, then maybe we will have some no, actually even in there we have to make sure that we define in the same format. So what I mean is that once you define, like if you define using the same variable, you cannot define again because this variable is not exactly same to this one. So because of that, even though I say that I want to change the value of the variable first, it does not really know whether this first variable is exactly similar to this first one that I have defined. So we can clearly see that in the case where if we define a certain variable type, a variable um, uh, of variable of uh, age, and then if we try to change the value of the age, there would be some error if I try to change the value of age. So if I define the value of age as val type, then I cannot change the value of age in the next instances. So in order, if I want to do that change, then I need to define the age variable as a var type. Then that error will be gone, which means that var type of variable, the values of those variables can be changed. Also, there are val type, lists. So val type list. So you can define a certain list, and you can define the various elements that should go in this list. However, you change this, you try to change this, an error comes. That means you cannot reassign this list again with another set of values. So you are not allowed to define another list with the same variable name because it is being defined as val type. So if you want to define a changeable list, that can be done using this mutable list of type. And mutable list of type means that inside this list, you can change the elements, the value of the elements. However, you cannot change the type of the list, right? So if you try to change the type of the list, let's say if you want to define this other friends list with integers, then you will get some errors. I think that if I say that I want the 0th element of this list to be 1, let's say an integer, then it will give me an error, which means that I cannot change the type of the list, and I cannot change the I cannot define different other data types into this string list that I have initially defined. The software has already taken that this list called other friends is a string list, and the values of the string list can change, but the values must be string. So you cannot introduce new data types into the into this val type of data. However, like if you want, you can change the a element, right? Element value by uh, uh, by defining the element index, and you can give another element value of which is another string. So you can print it out and see whether like other friends list has been adjusted or not, and we can see whether some kind of error is there. Yeah, so we need to close this entire main function. So we initially we can see that there are some outputs occurring. So println function is can be used to print out the strings, and this the functions of the code can be uh, uh, detected or debugged using the println function. If you want to find the error of a code, you can use the println function to print the intermediate outputs of the code. So if you use println function, everything that we have asked for comes. So in here we have outputs hello Android devs 101, which is I think 101 corresponds to this, and then println age corresponds to 6, then println friends correspond to the list of friends, which is ABC, and then in here while other friends I have other friends list I have printed out using println other friends, and the updated list uh, has been returned, and we see that we can see the initial list using this, and then we can see how the code has changed and how the initial list was and how the second list was. So using mutable list type, we can change the element values, but we cannot change the type of the list. If we try to change the type of data that goes into this list, we will get some error. Did you have any questions so far? So with related to the null safety or the null values, nullable variables, we will talk about that with a lot of, with lot of significance. So null safety, or we are going to talk about nullable variables. So in here, we can define variables that can be either null or that can have a certain value. So if we want to define a nullable variable, you need to define it using the Elvis operator. So there's a operator which is the question mark, right? So question mark is known as Elvis operator, and Elvis operator is used to define the uh, nullable functions, nullable variables. So nullable functions or variables can be defined using Elvis operator. When we use the nullable functions or variables, it means that the value of the certain variable, value of the output can be either null or it can have a value. Okay, so what does it mean to have a null? Right? What does it mean that you have a null value? What is a null? Right? So why do we need null functions or null variables? Why do we need them? So in coding, we might have some variables that do not have any values at a certain point in the time. Unless it has some kind of elements, it will have null values, which means it does not have a value, but we have allocated some space in our memory for that value to be stored. So null actually is like a, a, a placeholder that has some space in the memory, and it does not have a value, has a space in the memory, and does not have uh, no value. It does not have any value though. So these null variables are important in coding, where you consider all the different cases that the variable can go through or the variable can take. So we have to consider all the types of values that it can take. So if you have, for example, a certain value for a variable, uh, then we can, uh, if we can assign some value later, we can do that to a null variable or a nullable variable, which means that if there's a variable which is both, which can be null, then we can initially start with a null variable, and then we can define a certain value to that variable in a later instance, right? So yeah, so I think what I think this student is saying is also what I think I mentioned. So that means that you can assign a value to a variable later if we want in the code, and initially we can give the type of the variable as a nullable variable. So in the Kotlin we have nullable variables, and those variables can be defined like using this Elvis operator. The Elvis operator is the question mark. So this val function, uh, val variable can be defined as a nullable variable. So if you want to define it as a nullable variable, you can define it using the by defining this Elvis operator after the variable type. So after variable type, you can put the question mark to say it is the nullable variable. And then I can say some kind of a string as the initial value of that variable. Or else I can also say that it is null in here. And then I can also define uh, the length of a certain variable, right? Let's say I want to define the length of the variable bad, right? So length of the variable I define as another variable type, which is of val. Then I define it as some kind of, actually it is an integer value that I'm trying to achieve here. And this variable length bad, or bad length, I would say bad length, the length of this string. That's what I'm trying to achieve here. So if I try to find the length of this string, so what would it give? Will it give an output or will it give an error? If I try to find the length of the this variable bad, if I try to go like this, right? If I go like this, will this give an output to me? Will this be will this give a output, or will this uh, give an error? So this gives an error, and it says that uh, we cannot define lengths for variables that we have defined as null, right? We can do that, but with a certain procedure. So first we have said that bad variable is a null variable. So that means that we need to first define whether it's null or not. And if it is not null, only we need to find the length. And that we can do by saying that if this bad variable is null, that means we put the Elvis operator here. If it is null, then the length also should be null, or it should be 0. So the length should be 0 at that point, which means that for this corresponding situation where the bad variable is a null, right, the length will also be by default 0, right? So that is what we mean in here. So in here, all the cases are considered. So with this small expression, we are considering all the possible combinations. So whether I put a value in here or not, it will not give me an error, because it will consider the cases, both cases of the case where it is null and of the case where it actually has a value. So this question mark defines the null condition. What happens when we have a null value as the variable value? So if there's a null value, what should happen is that if there's a null value, the null at the null point, the output should be returned as 0 in this case, in this specific case. So we can define what should happen if the null case is achieved. We can define the return value using this expression. So do you have any questions about that? Okay, so we can type out the output of this variable value using the println. And if I want to find the value of a certain variable, I can use this $sign and I can mention the variable name. And if I want to put a new line, I can use this backslash and n. So this means new line. And so it will give, if we go to the new line, when we run this code. So bad length 3. So length is defined as the number of characters in this string. So if I say something else, it will give another value. So the number of characters that is encompassed in this entire string is considered, including the space, which will give a total length of 8. There's a null value, or if it is defined as null, we will get a 0 as the output. So we have given in the code that if the variable value is null, the output should be 0. So it is shown from the println statement, and it gives us that bad length is 0. So one question is, after assigning also, will it be the same as using Elvis operator? What is meant by that?
Ma'am,
Yeah.
it's just before giving some value for that, right, ma'am? We use as Elvis operator to find the length. We use bad question mark dot length because it's in
Uh,
no values. But after assigning also, do we have to use to find length? So bad question mark dot length question mark.
so what I mean, what do you mean by we have to use this question mark in here to show that the bad is a nullable variable, and also mention that like if it is null, then what should happen should be mentioned here, right? If we don't mention this in here, right, this question mark in here like will be something that is like the in this line the code will not know like what is the meaning of this question mark. So we want to get some return output from this code. So if it is null, then it should be 0, right? So if it is null, we need to have an idea like what can be null. So I mean this length is a function, right? Only the variable value can be either null or having a certain value. So this one we need to still mention that it can get null at one point. If it is null, then what is happening? We can define after a space and then we can define the output like this. So this can be the standard way of defining the output related to this specific question mark that we have defined. So for this specific variable, for the null condition, we need to do this. That's all that it says. So for cases where it has a value, this null component will not be taken into consideration. So this is a standard way of writing that. So we cannot actually change it. Is it okay?
Yeah, ma'am. Okay.
Great. Then also we discussed about something called the lambda functions. So lambda functions also we have defined, but before that I think we will go into if else functions, right? So there are two different ways of defining if else conditions, and you basically switch case uh, methods. I mean, in programming language, we have switch operations where you consider different cases, and in certain cases you have to do some action. So you have to do some kind of a operation. So we will discuss about those functions and how those uh, functions are defined. So for example, like if we have uh, yeah, so in addition to what we discussed earlier, we will carry on with this new code piece where we try to introduce the if else functions. So I think I will just put in here what in what I mean. So we can uh, we can define a variable called friend. No, yes. So in here we have a certain variable type called friends. So we cannot define that again in this function. So uh, what what we are trying to do here is we are trying to consider a scenario where we are facing a null variable. So So I think I'm trying to define a variable. Um, I'm trying to define a function where uh, I have two variables. One variable is a nullable variable called friend. This friend variable is a string type one, and it can be either null or can have a certain value. I'm trying to see whether, like, if you are given a certain string into this function, right? Whether I can find the amount of amount of elements in that list that have the certain specific string. So in here, I have defined another like main list, which is called as other friends. That list I have already defined in another place. So I can give it as an input data into this function. As the output of this function, the output will be of integer type. And then if I see that the friend variable type is null, then it should return 0. So this is what it says from this if condition. So I think it is a very straightforward command. So if friend is null, friend variable can be null, right, at some point. So if it is null, then you should return the value 0. And then if it is not null, that means like once you have defined this code, then the code knows that the friend is not null anymore. So in cases where you find friend inside this other friends list, the friend score must be calculated. So in this case, actually, I think we don't have to define the null conditions because we have defined the case inside this loop, which correspond to the case uh, where we have the uh, other situation where the friend is not null. The friend has some kind of string value, right? So in here we get a certain error, right? So I think we will run this and we will see the error is. So operator call is not allowed on a nullable receiver other friends. So uh, the the list that we have cannot this list that we have can be null as well. So because of that, we cannot actually use this kind of a command to obtain values from this nullable list, right? Without explicitly mentioning uh, the case that we are trying to uh, we are trying to we need to define that other friends must be non-null, or mm, other friends list should be uh, non-null. So I think we do like this. Think we can consider the scenario where other friends is not. Mhm. So whenever you get a red sign, that means there's some kind of a error there. So when we are working with nullable functions, the situation is that the software might get confused about the situation that we need to have when we define this null Elvis operator, right? So we need to define like whether it's null or not, and then based on that, the output should be obtained. So then we need to actually consider those things and then define this if else operations, right? So in here I have tried to avoid the null situation, and then go to the case where the null condition is not there and do the do the functions for the list when it has a certain value. So if it gives some error, we need to go with another alternative methods of finding the length. So we will see like how to go to that situation, right? So we can maybe, right? So I can say something else like without going for additions or something. I can try to go for other kind of maybe operation, obtain a certain value, even that is not functioning. Some error is coming. Uh, so the error you can see. So I think uh, when we are working with null, we have to we need to avoid getting uh, null. I mean, in places where we don't want it. So in order for us to avoid that, we need to uh, either consider them separately or consider the null function, null condition, and the condition with the value in that uh, variable at the same time. So we can adjust the code to correct that error. Right, so my initial code uh, was the one where I defined the null function first. Then I try to obtain the score or the value of uh, elements in the list using um, using the second if function. So when I do that, again get some problem where I cannot find the length. So if I'm going to, maybe I will try to use this list where I have fixed list without a mutable list. Yes. So I think it still gives that error. I need to find out the reason for that. It says that it cannot find the length of these friends. So it is a list. So for me to find the length, I need to either define some kind of other variable. It is working. Then I can find the value. So I think now it's fine. The function, the command was wrong. So in this code, like what what I have tried to do is that for situation where I define a nullable variable, um, which can be uh, which can so what I try to do here is that uh, if there's a list of strings that has uh, values like for example ABC, if there are some values to this friends list, then it is not a null list. And uh, if there are some values, then the number of strings must be counted from this function. So if the variable or this list is null, then the value that should return should be 0. So the null uh, condition is taken separately using this first if loop by applying this condition. If the list is null, then this should happen. However, if it is not null, then you can proceed with this part. The program automatically takes that already the null condition has been considered, and therefore in this part the non-null condition must be applied. Okay, so I think you can also think about it later as well. So in the first time when I mentioned about this expression, I mentioned that we can define the null condition and the return type based on the null condition in the same line. But if you want, you can do it separately using these kind of if functions or if cases, where you can define the case for the null condition, and you can define another loop for the other condition where the values are available in that certain variable. So regarding the null variables, that I think will be enough for the moment. And then there are other functions that we call as lambda functions, and we can use lambda functions to define a function in the Kotlin without giving separate function name. Right in here, we define the function with a certain function name, find friend scope. Instead, we can define a certain function without explicitly mentioning fun, fun, a certain function name, without explicitly mentioning like that. We can define the function called square, right? We can define a function called square using this method, and we can define the value of that, the output value of that function as well. Function name is square, and the output of that function, input of that function should be integer, output should be another integer. And the function's operation can be defined inside the kind of curly brackets, and you can show that the operation using this kind of a method. So what I mean is that you need to use the arrow sign, then you can show what should happen to the input parameter that we give x, and what should come as the output, right? So when we are using this function, we can directly use it as like you can use this function, and inside this function you can put the whatever the input parameters that you need to define. So if I want to find the square of 8, I can say square, and inside brackets I can say the integer that I want to square. So basically once I do like this, I can print the output and see whether it squares the 8 uh, 8 number 8. So the square of 8 is, and you can say that the value should be the result. So I should close with quotation marks. So the value should be so I think I can run this. So the square of 8 is 64. So what has happened is that the square has been stored as a function, right? So that kind of functions we call as lambda functions or lambda expressions, right? So lambda expressions do not have a function name, but it does the function of a certain function. So it has a certain method that it follows, and therefore it is known as lambda function. However, the square is the function actually, and it is not explicitly defined as a function name. So some similar examples will be where you define a lambda function inside another lambda function. So by defining a lambda function inside another lambda function, right? So in here we can define a function, right? You can define a function first, right? Or else actually in this example what I'm defining is, if I'm defining a normal function inside which I have a lambda function. I define a function name update, right? Update some kind of a temperature, let's say. So the function name is update temperature. The input parameters that I will define for the function I give inside these brackets. So the input parameters will be named as one will be named as temperature temp, and it's a variable name, and the variable type will be int. And then another I define another variable called operation. That one, the output, sorry, the input should be int and the output should be int. So this function update temperature will take two inputs, temperature and operation. So this operation is a function actually. The operation is a function, and this operation will actually be a lambda function, which means that you I mean in here you, I mean it's a like it's doing some function where you give an input and you gives an output uh, of a certain integer type. So finally the output of this function update temperature will be of type int. So we will actually look into that in a great detail. So function name, you need to first define. Inside the brackets, you need to define the input parameters that you give to the function. And the input parameters that you give are basically, one is temperature input parameter and its type is int or integer. Then you give another parameter or another function, right? You give another function as the input, and that function, inside the function you define what are the input parameters, right? What are the input parameters, and based on the input parameters certain output will come, and that output will be stored as the return value or the as the final value of this um, operation function. So after after using these two parameters, a certain value will be returned from this function as the output of this function. The output will be an integer value. So we will see how that value will be returned. So the return value will be an integer value. That return will be generated by uh, input, right, by this function called operation. And the currently we haven't defined what operation is, right? So operation is a function that right, that we need to define, and that function we can define in the next line, right? So we need to define this operation uh, where you where you define what should happen inside this uh, right. So whatever the operation that you define, that will act on this temperature variable. So this operation function we need to define here. So that operation function can be anything. So I will just try to write and the code and then explain. So we can define a function which has a certain input uh, and a certain output. So this function, Okay. So what I am doing here is that I'm defining a lambda function cold operation. Sorry, cold. Actually, lambda function is relative temperature. So this lambda function, I will define as lambda here, right? So this lambda function is defined like this, right? The lambda function's name is relative temperature, and the lambda function gets an input as the integer input and gives out a integer output. So basically, the integer input that we provide is a certain variable called temp, and the temp variable will be deducted by, I mean, 27 will be deducted by this temp variable. So the output will be temp minus 27. So for this, whatever this lambda function, if we give a certain input, uh, integer input, the integer input will be this temp variable. So this temperature variable will be deducted, and the output will be another integer. So this this is the lambda function. Basically, relative temperature is the lambda function, and then you can apply that on another function, inside another function, which we define as update temperature. Update temperature is another separate function that we define, and this has two variables. One thing is temperature variable, other thing is the operation variable, which is a function, which is a like a lambda function. So the lambda function is executed once we execute this update temperature function. So the lambda function, right? Lambda function will be uh, used in here, where you have to input the temperature variable as the input variable to the lambda function. So the lambda function will be defined explicitly like this. It needs an input parameter temperature. So when we are calling this function update temperature, we need to first define the lambda. I mean, we need to define these two variables. One thing is the temperature, and the other thing is the lambda function that we want to specifically use, right? So if we do like that, then we will be able to uh, obtain a certain output um, for the as the output of that function, right? So this is how the lambda functions work. So basically what you need to know is, for lambda functions, there's no specific function that we define using in this syntax, but that is defined using basically using a certain algorithm that we define inside curly brackets in here. So we can basically define all the operation inside the function using just one line and one or two lines. Then you can define the entire function of that lambda function. So so lambda functions do not have a specific name, and you can use that function for inside other functions as well. So this is an example where you use the lambda function inside the main function called update temperature. So I think regarding lambda functions, that's about it. So we will start the quiz that I discussed about. So lambda functions, those things will be useful for you. So apart from that, I also want to mention to you about um, another like sample code where we can define if else. Sorry, we can define um, switch cases. I will get the code directly. So in here, I will explain a little bit about this function. So this function has a uh, uh, like this format. So the function is defined with a certain input variable, which is result. You give a certain input variable into this function. And in here, actually, I have not specified what exam result is because I have just taken it from another code piece. So we will assume that we give a certain input parameter called result, and that result contains some value called score. So based on this result score value, we need to take decisions on the value on the output. So we use this when command to use if cases to denote cases where like we can directly say when the result score is between 90 and 100, the output should be A. Right? When the result score is between 80 and 89, the output should be B. When the result is between 70 and 79, the output should be C. If else, it should be F. So this is the normal syntax that we can use for switch cases. You know, like case 1, case 2, case 3. Likewise, we have switch cases, right? When we are discussing about programming languages, other programming languages, they have switch uh, switch operation where you define certain cases and define the specific outputs for that specific case. So when the result score is certain between a certain range, the output should be A, and between another range, the output should be another value. Between another range, then output should be another range. And if all these conditions are not met, then the output should be F. So like that. So I mean, we can define this for a grading algorithm where you want to consider different cases of, I mean, different cases where you consider different ranges of the marks. Based on the marks, you give outputs for specific mark ranges. So for specific mark ranges, output should be different. So for such kind of cases where you define different cases, you use the function called when. So when a certain parameter is considered, and if that parameter is in this range, you can take the output as A. Likewise, B, C, and F. So the return value is this A, B, C, O, F, right? And when you're defining some certain ranges between two values, you can use two double dots, and then you can define the these two values that bound that. So every integer value that is inside this two, I mean, values. I mean, if we define the mark as an integer value, then we can take all the integer values in between these two ranges, and then we can get all those values by just defining two dots like this. So to get a range, we can use two dots, and we can easily get the range using that. So this is basically what I wanted to discuss regarding the Kotlin, I mean, language basics. We will also discuss further regarding classes, objects, and the properties of objects and the functions that we can define on top of the objects. So, so I think we will move on to the quiz, and then we will discuss about the quizzes and its outputs, and I think we will discuss about the classes in the next class when we have the time. So, right. So I think I will try to, um, yeah, I will try to continue. So can you hear me? Can you try to, can you hear me? 0494? Okay. I think now you can hear me. So I will stop sharing. Then I need to share the quiz with you, right? So I need you to look at the meeting screen, and then look at the question that appears on the screen, and then you can mark the answers in your own device by after you look at the question, right? So you just first look at the question, and then you put the answer in your own device. So I'm going to start this quiz. So I want, you are not ready, you can let me know. So I have this set up. So you need to go to kahoot.it. So I will anyway put a link in the chat. Can go to that link. So please join to this meeting. Sorry, this quiz. Also, please mention your ID number if possible. If you can change your profile name again, the new one, if possible, put your ID number and your name also. I mean, I don't mind having that, but if you can mention your ID number also, I think that I will be able to give you marks for the quiz easily, identifying your identity. So, like in the LMS, I will update the bonus marks. So the marks that I'm giving, that you are getting from this quiz, right? I'm not giving marks. The quiz itself will give you marks. So those marks will be updated in the LMS. So maximum of 3 points will be added to your final grade, right? And these marks will be awarded during the meeting, lesson duration. So I think we can start. Are there any more students to join? So there are 14 people in this, 17 people in this meeting. Only 10 are there in this quiz. Okay, I think now everybody's here. So I will start. So you look at the screen and look at the question and then decide the answer, and then you can select the answer in your own devices. So which of the following steps are usually specific to the mobile developer role? Yes. So the functions that mobile developer does is asked in this question. So if you so a mobile developer who develops apps will be doing these tasks. So writing tests to access the performance of the app, and then updating the app after its releasement. So you can update the features of the app. Then also you need to develop the backend app, backend code of the app. So all those functions can be considered as the functions or work of a mobile app developer. So I think most of the students who answered, I did that correctly. Okay. Which of the following apps is considered a native app? Instagram, Facebook, camera, and Twitter. Okay, so native apps. What do we mean by native apps? Native means that it uses the functions of the smartphone. So when you talk about these other apps such as Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, they use not only the phone's specific functions, but also they use the web technologies and the web resources in the web. So, for example, if you are using Instagram, you need the internet to access the Instagram. Otherwise, you cannot. Uh, I mean, you cannot really feel the. You cannot really use that app. But native apps are apps that you can use even in the offline mode when you don't have connection to the internet. So the native app actually uses the functions that are available in the smartphone, and it will give you certain output. So camera is one such app where you can take photos, you can take some videos, and then you can store them in your phone, and then you can do some other functions. So you using the camera does not require you to have internet connection. So what is the primary function of a mobile operating system? Yeah, so mobile operating system is the foundation that uh, connects the application with the resources. So it is like the bridge that connects the application with the resources. So mobile operator is the channel that provides the applications access to the device's resources. So it is the kind of the fundamental software that is required in a mobile app to connect the application with the resources. So other things such as visual appearance, security features of the hardware, regulating the power supply, they are not necessarily done mainly by the mobile operating system, but maybe some functions of the applications. Right, using the applications, we can uh, enhance the visual appearance of the mobile device. Um so we can control the different aspects of the mobile device using specific applications and specific features of the mobile OS. But mainly it is used to give the interaction between the application and the resources. The application can access the resources via the OS. So yes, so I think the yeah, so somebody has risen up to the first place. So which operating system allows for more customization due to its open source nature? So what is the operating system that has open source nature, open source code? So Android operating system has a source that is open source. That means source code. Uh, so anybody who wants to see the source code of Android, they can see it because it's accessible to anyone for free. If anyone wants to build their own Android-like operating system, they can do that. So they can access the code that is available with regard to the Android, and then they can build their own operating system. So because of this, Android operating system has become more popular with the crowd because of its free open source nature. So a lot of people can access that code. When we go to the next question, what is the name of Apple's proprietary operating system for its mobile devices? So what is the operating system of Apple phones? iOS, right? So iOS is the Apple phone's operating system's name. Okay. Can Android Studio be downloaded on other operating systems beside the default in this Android Studio downloading place? So, I mean, can you download it for other operating systems beside the default one that is shown there? Yes. So there's a default operating system that is shown there when you're downloading, but you can choose other types of operating systems, such as Linux, Apple, Mac OS, and so depending on your requirement, you can download the version that you want. So depending on the operating system that you prefer, you can download for any type of Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. So, what are the two most popular mobile operating systems as of now? Android and iOS. So, I think most of you had gotten it correctly. So many people in the earth, most of them use Android and Apple iOS. It is said that Android user there are billions of Android users in the world, and millions of iOS users in the world. So combined, they constitute of the major demand in the world. So when you're talking about the job market, still Android app development has a high demand when you compare with the iOS app development. And also Android now has like similar performance as of iOS as well. So which means that Android also has risen to the kind of the near performance of the iOS apps. So because of that, Android is also like considerably okay actually when you compare with Apple phone. And those two Android and iOS systems are the most widely used operating systems in the phones. So the operating system is the most fundamental software for any mobile device. Yes, so operating system is the software on which we develop the apps, right? So we need the app. In order to build the app, we need the OS, and it is the fundamental software that we have to first have in a mobile device, and we use that to develop the applications. So I think that's it for the quiz. So I think you have got some marks. So I think I will upload the marks in the LMS, right? So I think yes. So I will end the quiz from here. Also, I think I gave another quiz during the last class, right? So if you prefer, I can give that quiz also right now. I think I will give that quiz also because I think if I don't do it in this week, then I will maybe do that quiz in the next class. So anyway, do you have any questions regarding this quiz? Were there any places that you were confused? If you want to do another quiz, maybe I will do in the next class. Right? Maybe I will do that in the next class. So without doing it in the same class, I will do it in the next class, and that quiz will be based on the Kotlin basics. I have discussed the Kotlin basics up to some extent in the today's class. So maybe you can go through those basics, and we will discuss about those Kotlin basics in the next class. And we will do the quiz on that. So I think with that, I think I will end for today. So if you have any questions, you can ask. And I also need to take your attendance. So if possible, please mark your attendance. I will share the OTP with you. So if you have any questions, you can ask. Otherwise, you are free to leave. So thank you for attending in today's lecture.